Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to the session on use cases and opportunities of cybersecurity R&D with a special focus on IoT, hardware, cloud computing, quantum computing, 5G, automotive, and several other sectors. Without further ado, I would like to welcome our esteemed panelists. Our first panelist is Dr. Brejesh Lal. Uh, Professor Lal is a professor in the Department of Electrical Engineering at IIT Delhi, which is one of the 23 IITs created to be the center of excellences for training, research, and development in science, engineering, and technology in India. He has been the coordinator of two centers of excellences, Airtel IIT Delhi CoE in telecommunications and Ericsson IIT Delhi 5G Center of Excellence in the past. He is also in charge of an IoT laboratory that was set up in collaboration with Samsung and served as an expert in numerous government and private agencies. Welcome, Professor Lal. Our second panelist is Professor Debdeep Mukhopadhyay. Professor Mukhopadhyay is a professor in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering at IIT Kharagpur and a renowned expert in the field of cryptography, hardware security, cryptographic engineering, fault attacks, side channel attacks, and side channel resistant architectures. He is also associated with the Secure Embedded Architecture Laboratory SEAL at IIT Kharagpur and is working on several aspects of hardware security. Our third panelist is Dr. Ananda Prasad. Dr. Prasad is a founder and CEO of Wenovator. Wenovator works in the area of security strategy, solution development and standardization, and security training. It also offers expert classes on the topics such as new security controls introduced by 5G, secure transition from 4G LTE to 5G, Internet of Things, Open RAN, and operating secure, virtual, and containerized environments. Welcome, Professor Prasad. Our fourth panelist is Dr. Narendra Gangavarapu, who is the Joint Secretary at the National Security Council Secretariat, Government of India. Dr. Gangavarapu is a renowned expert with over 30 years of experience in telecom sectors, and where he has done several roles in network planning, installation, operation and maintenance, among several others. He's previously served as the DDG, Deputy Director General, Department of Telecommunications, Government of India, with overall responsibilities for policy formulation, implementations, and matters pertaining to security of telecom networks. Welcome, Dr. Gangavarapu. And last but not the least, I would like to welcome our moderator, Mr. Vinayak Godse. Mr. Godse is the Vice President of Data Security Council of India and also drives the National Center of Excellence for Cybersecurity Technology Development and Entrepreneurship. Over to you, Vinayak.
Thank you, Vikas, for generous introduction for all of us. So in this session, since morning, we have been discussing about cybersecurity R&D as an area which is a focus of this particular roadshow that we have been doing. And this entire day is a planning, look at the different facets of the discussion basically, and this particular panel discussion, what we like to do is probably deliberate on how the research agenda can get formulated, what are those areas and priorities which are emerging for cybersecurity. And that could be from the two perspectives. One is definitely there are value creation, there are interest in value creation, there are some interests which are emerging and some ideas which are emerging, and there are some ideas that we take in to the table because of some commercial value creation. And cybersecurity is also a national security area because many aspects of cybersecurity now are discussed in the context of national security. So we would like to discuss various facets of how the agenda of cybersecurity research is being devised, what kind of priorities that basically which are emerging, which are those areas which are becoming very significant area for any researcher. Suppose there are a lot of tech PhD students which are approaching us and probably approaching other institutions as well if they want to work in cybersecurity. So where exactly they can look at which those areas they should be picking up. And then gradually then we try to move towards how exactly these research initiatives are formulated, what kind of partnership is being made. And if you really want to scale up this cybersecurity research in the upcoming area, so what we need to do as a country, as a larger catalyst forces that we are putting together, for example, National Cybersecurity Coordinator's Office have been taking a lot of effort in creating that larger structure for cybersecurity research, including Ministry of Electronics and IT, and we are also doing our bit basically. So what could we learn and what could we devise in terms of our strategy to scale this effort, do those partnership and make that research really workable and really adaptable by the industry or by the society actually. So what I'd like to really request each of you, starting with Dr. Lal, you briefly give your opening remark, each of you, and then we'll have conversation taking this discussion ahead. So Dr. Lal.
Thank you very much. I welcome all the participants. Good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon to all the panelists. The opening remarks that I'm going to make are going to be twofold. Very briefly, I'll talk about the fact that, one, the way we look at security is going through a sea change because of the way the networks are evolving, the way the applications are evolving, and the way our expectations from the networks are evolving. What this means is that the networks are becoming more and more capable. What it also means is that the endpoints are changing. Instead of humans, they've now become machines, and there will be even more machines in time to come. And the last thing is that some of these endpoints are relatively weak in terms of their processing capability. So they are easy to, for example, be a mechanism to enter into the network. So that is one thing that has to be kept in mind when we design the security paradigms for the future. The second thing that I want to talk about is there are two interesting areas which are coming up, which can change the way we look at security in light of what I just said. The first is a lot of security right now is driven from the behavior of signature based, or based on the mistakes that are happening, or based on the attempts that the people are making to break into a system. But there is another aspect of a breach in security, and that aspect is that it impacts the environment in a manner that you do not expect. So if you have a mechanism to understand the change in environment because of a breach, for example, a car suddenly speeding up or a car suddenly changing lane, and if this behavior is repeated a couple of times, then this itself is an indicator of the fact that there might have been a security breach. So trying to leverage AI ML to come up with this dynamic scenario of context or behavior based security. And the second area that could make a lot of sense is using blockchains for auditing some of the communication that is happening between these entities. Because, the moment the communication becomes audited, people are careful about not making mistakes. But more importantly, if a mistake does happen, you can attribute it to the breach, and therefore you can plug it in future times. So this is all that I'm going to start with right now. We'll come back to more of this later when we discuss.
Yeah, so and good that these are 2-3 areas that you talked about, the context and using context to identify things could have gone wrong, and probably endpoints and the constrained endpoints, and they will be coming to the network, and probably how can you use the blockchain to govern security and attribute the particular issues and problems. So these are very interesting, good 3 ways. But I now will come to Dr. Debdeep, because you do very focused hardware and IoT specific work. So what you see, what you have been doing until now, and what is happening now, and probably where it will go from now.
So thanks, Vinayak, and a very good afternoon to everyone. So yeah, I mean, I also believe that cybersecurity, as we all know, is an extremely emerging area. It's always changing, and in particular to the topics that we have here identified, I would like to say that it's very important to understand the fundamentals of this topic. So in order to understand the fundamentals, it's a key to understand, like to develop proper curriculum in the universities and in the in the research labs, and also to connect them with the problems that industry faces, because probably the better R&D problems are visualized in the industry, where they see the actual problems which are needed to be mitigated. So I would like to emphasize that if we are able to bridge these two units properly, then that can help us to take lot, like good steps forward. And I would also like to mention that what I have faced, or what I've seen, as a researcher in this domain is that we should not have any, blockings in our mind. For example, like when we have a problem, right? When we have a sort of an issue of as cybersecurity, as expensive as cybersecurity, then we need expertise in various domains. We need expertise in hardware, we need expertise in software, we need expertise in the theory, expertise in the practice. So therefore, it is almost impossible for one entity to cover all these aspects. So we need to develop a complementary team of expertise, and one of the ways of doing that is by setting up, like proper R&D units or R&D labs, even in a university framework. So setting up specialized laboratories is extremely crucial, wherein we can look into, the cutting edge problems and we can try to address them. One of the key issues that I have seen is, in order to give, like confidence to our research scholars, it is important to enable them to participate in international forums and also, gain experience from that. So I would like to kind of stop here, and maybe, we can continue further as we progress. And these are some of the initial thoughts that I would like to bring forward.
Yeah. We'll come to Dr. Prasad by hearing professors from IIT Kharagpur and IIT Delhi, and you have your own company now, and you're steering a lot of interesting work in a new network which is emerging. So, and the role that research is playing in the work that you have been doing, and anything that you have been doing and which you probably had been doing until now, and probably something is changing now, and the future, how it is evolving for you, and contribution of the research in that work, if you like to comment on that.
Sure. If you allow me, I will while listening to the professors, I put together a few of my slides and thought maybe I can show them that will help from my perspective. So let me see. I think it is this one. Can you see? Yeah, it is this. It's the right one. So what I did is I just put together a couple of slides. I won't show all of them. It's just 2 or 3 of them to set some background, and then I'll say a few words. So this I can skip. Okay. This is just, I don't know to talk about it. This is just to show a normal mobile system and the complexities it brings. Yeah. And the left side, all the services and devices and the services that come in both left and right, actually. We were hearing just now about these aspects as well. Yeah. And this is what is happening now. Yeah. I mean, a lot of changes are happening from spectrum to business side to technologies that are coming out there. And then we talk about security for it. Yeah. I'll come to my thoughts after this. And then this is a picture I often show how technology has progressed in time. We went from pure voice to some level of data, and then we had IP truly on the devices, and technology enhances, and those technologies gets added to the next generation. And as we go to 6G, as we heard from both professors, we are seeing the AI, we are seeing the DLT and stuff like that. I'm not saying blockchain on purpose. And other technologies coming up, they will add up to form the 6G. Yeah? And then you need security for that. So couple of points on this from my side. I think earlier also I'd spoken on this. And I've heard just now as well, the basics must not be forgotten. And all the time, the basics becomes the biggest issue. So if you ask me what I've been in industry doing security for over 20 years now. And often the problem is the basics. Yeah, you don't take care of hardening and things like that. The basics also has identity and access management, but that is not that simple. Yeah, how do you do proper identity and access management in the cloud era? And the cloud era that is going towards serverless now, from container to serverless, and still you will have the on-premise solutions. Yeah. So how do you take care of that? It is extremely difficult, and then that too. I mean, with different levels of access control. Yeah, when you're talking about it, so all the privilege level and stuff like that. That remains a very big issue. Yeah, that needs to be solved. And then the next one is, of course, monitoring and operations. Yeah, so I'm distinguishing two things here: Security Operations Center for monitoring, and then security operations. And for both of them, how will you take care of automation over there? That's one point. And that's where, again, wherever you have algorithms, where you have policies, then AI, ML, and things like that comes in. And then how can you take care of prediction and then accordingly act on it? That's the most important part as well. Yeah, because you need to, we don't have enough resources around the globe for security. Yeah, and if you keep on adding things, cost increases. Yeah. And trust me, security actually is a business driver. That's what I always say. But we also don't want to cause all being business driver. We don't want to increase our capex and capex and opex. Yeah. So these are a few points. I totally agree with previous speakers, and I think we'll come to that later. This is my view on holistic security that needs to be taken care of. People say that people use this word, but practically how to do it is also, I think, a master's and PhD thesis in itself. Yeah. I'll not go into that because it will take too much time. So that's all from me for now. Thank you.
I think thanks for putting this together and again bringing the focus to the doing basic rights as well, because sometimes in all these new verbiage which get created, right? So in that we may miss on our attention to the basics. So now we'll come to Narendra sir. You are sitting at a level where you look at all of these interaction. Here itself we have 3 voices heard, and you must be hearing so many voices coming from all other quarters and direction basically. So upon that you are deriving something for the overall strategy for the cybersecurity research. So how do you see that is evolving at your level, and from your level, how do you see this agenda of cybersecurity R&D in the country?
Yeah, this. I mean, it's been well brought out by the speakers, the panelists, other panelists that we have on the panel today. It's a mosaic. When you talk of cybersecurity, it's a mosaic, and there's so many pieces to that, and everybody brings his own perspective. But based on certain reports that we get in here, the vulnerability reports and breach reports that come. I second what Dr. Prasad has told, regarding the basics. You find that the common vulnerabilities that have been known for ages now, they still persist. Like cross-site scripting is there, the directory listing is there. You find that it keeps on repeating. And then you wonder, you do lots of advanced research, but the thing is you don't address the basics. And it is these common vulnerabilities which are still there in the systems that are being used to attack. And again entry into the system. So it just boils down to, okay, how do you address this problem? Is that a research problem to be addressed? Okay, so that is one, so that is one area. How do we go about it, and how do you ensure that we have secure design that happens? What is it that the organizations are missing? Is it that they're not using proper vendors to design the systems? So that is one part. I think that itself is a research topic to find out how to get a system in place to ensure that secure design is followed, proper audit procedures are put in place to at least take care of these known common vulnerabilities when they deploy the systems. That's one. The other is, again, I come to what Dr. Prasad said regarding identity access management. IoT security, I mean, you must have heard I speak a lot about it. Mm-hmm. And it's become very cliched. Whenever I meet somebody, they think I'll only speak about IoT security. It's come down to that now. Yeah. But yes, because, the projections are there. You already see there are lots of large-scale deployment of IoT devices. You also see projections from Gartner that, by next year you have around 25 billion devices, and statistics are saying that 75 billion devices by 2025. Okay, so, and these are some installations that you cannot retrofit, in the sense that, there are certain systems that you could actually do some security onboarding later on. But IoT device deployments, once they're there, it becomes very difficult to take care of that. So one is, device certification is one area, I think, that is required. Now, we don't have a mechanism that if somebody wants to purchase a secure IoT device and deploy it, does he have an option in this country to go out and go to the market and say, I want a secure IoT device? And what is the incentive for manufacturers to come with secure IoT devices? when the persons are purchasing, and there's a cost involved in securing those devices. You have to increase the footprint to put in basic encryption and basic security mechanisms in that, and then it becomes costly, more costly. Then you find that there's no market for it. Then what's the incentive for them? So this is another area, I think. Device certification and device identification and authentication and authorization is important, very important, and secure updates and upgrades for those devices now that they're deployed across. That's one important. The other area where is we talk a lot about risk analysis, and we say there's a lot of expertise around in the market. But when we talk to individual organizations or to sectoral regulators, we find that none of the security initiatives they take is based on any scientific risk analysis. So I think one area that we have to work on is to create a framework for some sort of a template or ready-made, booklet or something like that, which helps people in organizations and sectors to do a risk analysis before actually getting down to putting security measures in place. So these are some initial thoughts that I've got. I think what Rajesh Lal ji was telling, that regarding mechanization to understand the change in behavior, that is one. The security automation, is very important. The volumes of incidents, the types of breaches that will occur, it's humongous work, and it's very difficult unless you have an automation taking place. So I think that is another area I think we have required to focus on, automation of security, solutions. These are the initial comments that I've got.
Thank you, sir. So I'll come to Dr. Lal based on the comments that you made, and you talked about the constraint, right? So there is a multi-dimension. One is the constant. On the other side, you have data to process, because you want to identify the unknowns, which could be potentially a security problem. And then there is the speed, right? And now we all are worried about the kind of devices coming in, kind of traffic which is getting on the network. So there are a lot of blind spots which are getting created. So the security of a high-speed traffic is definitely another important challenge. So how do we see the possibility of from the computer science perspective, from the security science perspective, to take care of the constant devices on one hand, the data which is coming and getting thrown by all of the devices, and that are potentially important for the security. At the same time, the speed of the traffic also rising significantly.
Thank you for that question, and that was some very good points that all the panelists made. So, taking on a couple of them. The first one was about making the same mistake again and again and again. That, without doubt, is the biggest problem. If you have to keep on fixing the same thing every time, how will you fix the newer problems? So there, I'll digress a little and state that there are two more areas of research that we as a country should focus on. One is social sciences, and the other is policy. Research in the area of social sciences. This is, something to do with our behavior as well. Not making the same mistake a number of times. And the second reason why we need to look at it from the social point of view is that the changes are happening very, very fast. Okay, when changes happen very fast, it's very difficult for technology to keep pace. So at such times, it becomes very important to look at the social or science or behavioral aspect. And the third point is that the concept of privacy and security evolves with time. What meant a breach of privacy, 1,000 years ago is not true today. Neither will it be true 1,000 years from now. So, but the pace of change for the last 1,000 years was slow. Now, within 100 years, you have changes which were more than the kind that you had in 1,000 years. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that we have to be very careful about the impact on the behavior, on the ethics, on the morality, because this will fundamentally change the definition of security and privacy. So while we struggle with the techniques, we shouldn't forget their fundamental definitions and how they are evolving. And now coming back to what computer science can do, well, one thing that we can certainly do is leverage AI and ML a little more. The technologies which are fast pacing the deployment of systems that actually cause possibilities of increased security breaches, why don't we use the same tool to also secure ourselves. So the first point that we made was, of course, we need to understand why we keep making the same mistake every time. The second is security by design. It cannot be retrofitted. As Narendra Nath ji very correctly pointed out, the days of, bana lete and then we'll fix it later are gone. You cannot secure systems tomorrow because of their geographical and processing capability spectrum. You will not be able to retrofit them. So forget doing that. So you have to start now rather than do that later. But the third thing is key technological inputs. So there, things such as seeing why a breach happens, how a breach happens, and trying to understand that a breach is happening from the breach itself is something that is difficult to do. And people, so spoofing, for example, the person is trying to replicate your behavior exactly, but what he's not trying to replicate is the outcome of that behavior. What he's trying to do is he's trying to behave exactly like you would do so that we don't recognize you, but its impact is such that it's very different from what you want. So behavior based or dynamic or automated security is something that we should look at very, very carefully, because he can change the way he communicates and seem more and more like you and more difficult to identify. But the intention of the person who's causing the breach does not remain changed. He wants to cause mischief, and that will manifest in some way. So if we can identify that fast enough and have mechanisms to stop it, nip it in the bud, that would be a very good way to handle security in the future. And I will come back to the point that I made earlier, the blockchain thing. I will repeat why I feel that is important, because the choice of the term blockchain or whatever is not of importance here. The point is auditing the information as it moves from one place to the other, because the moment you start policing or auditing, people are careful about being superfluous or doing things incorrectly. And the second thing is they give you an opportunity to understand why things went wrong. You don't have to do all the protection before the problem happens. Some of the problems can be fixed after some problems occur, right? So if you have an audit of where the breach happened, how it happened, then you can know how to fix those breaches later. And this can also help you in overcoming this problem of information from trusted versus non-trusted sources, because a lot of new technology draws information from a multitude of sources. Not all of them are trusted, but if you can put in some degree of auditing there, then some of the less trusted sources can become a little more trusted. So these are the areas where AI ML can play a role in strengthening the construction of solutions such that they are secure. And once they are secure, you keep on monitoring the behavior of the ecosystem so that you quickly understand what the person is doing. And finally, you keep an audit of whatever caused the breach so that you can learn from those and save it in future times.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me come to Professor Debdeep, because usually in the context that we all have for the cybersecurity, we usually really don't reflect on the problems that could come from the hardware. And last 3-4 years, we had seen so many instances which are taking our attention to hardware, and especially we are also seeing couple of years, a lot of new startups who are coming in hardware security basically. Until now, it was believed that the hardware security is largely the defense organization. They will test, they will do the assessment and acceptance testing and some kind of evaluation, and before that getting deployed in the organization. But now enterprises are also now looking at this problem. So can you just help us understand how these hardware security challenges, what kind of opportunities creating at hardware security level?
Yeah, so first I would like to, like something that I generally try to motivate my students with, because I'm also from a CS computer science department, where hardware typically comes in the second, second list of even from the priority of the students. Okay, so we really do not have anything like only software or anything like only hardware, because even when we are talking about software, we are basically working still on a hardware platform, right? Like for example, the machines that we are using, the systems that we are building on, they are essentially hardware devices. So if they are fundamentally flawed, right, then no matter, like what we do on top of that, there will be still pitfalls and there will be still avenues for attacks. So therefore, what is important or extremely important, I would say, is to understand what are the opportunities and threats which are there, like from the various hardware solutions. Like for example, even companies like Intel, ARM, they essentially comes up, like with solutions like SGX, trust zones, which offer several, like opportunities of secure systems. At the same time, there are also threats which we need to identify and mitigate. So one of the biggest threats that we have seen, like when we talk about hardware devices, comes from what are called as side channel attacks, because many of the side devices will probably, like consume, power or electromagnetic radiations, their behavior under faults, which can be utilized to lead to devastating attacks. And many of these attacks have also been shown on IoT devices. For example, there was a paper in IEEE Security and Privacy led by Adi Shamir and their group, which shows that IoT can go nuclear if they are, so using side channels, they kind of completely reverse engineer the firmware, and then they, update the IoT devices, ensuring that their protections are destabilized. Okay. So therefore the question is, right, one thing I would like to definitely say that we need to form a, and I think some of the points we have mentioned in my previous in the previous discussions were, basically based on our identification of the threats. So how do you identify threats? That is probably a key factor, whether we are talking about, even when we are talking about hardware. So one of the things that I have seen is that when we want to build secure systems, it is very important to attack systems, because once you attack systems, you also have the mindset of, knowing where are the pitfalls. Okay. So it is probably good to, form something like a red team, blue team among your, in your research teams, and then have a proper handshake between them. So when we talk about the other important, I would say, opportunity that I see, or, problem area that I see in the context of hardware, particularly when I talk about IoT devices, is to find out lightweight root of trusts. Because, we have seen that many of the existing cryptographic algorithms like AES or elliptic curves and so on, they're extremely power hungry and resource hungry, which virtually it makes them, not usable. And therefore, right, the IoT products, there were some reports on Philips Hue lights and so on, they use authentication systems which are completely developed by their own, and sometimes they can be attacked by very simple techniques. So it is important to identify, proper root of trust. Some of the things that we try to look into are what are called as physically unclonable functions, or PUFs. So PUFs can be utilized or developed, and nowadays they are also being integrated with several hardware solutions. So that is probably one of the opportunities that I would see can be tried to look into. So likewise, there are other opportunities as well, but I think I will. And another point that I would also like to mention, it's kind of related to what we were discussing, is, we understand that we make or repeat the mistakes, right? Repeat the same mistakes. One of the reasons why I think that happens is because many of the developments are being done by people who are not security experts. So therefore, right, it is not a part of our training. I will give a very simple example to illustrate this. So when we basically in computer science curricula, right, understand algorithms.
And I think we heard last time as well that most of the academic institutions are also willing to come forward and work with many startups and enterprises as well.
Oh wow, that will be very interesting for me. Yes.
So Narendra sir, so if you have to really scale this effort, and that's what the intent of the today's this event is, how do we should plan? This is input for us as well, and probably reflection for you as well. There are definitely, I myself have seen the work that is happening in IIT Kharagpur. Those 20 plus students, I met them, I had been with them for a day long time, and got really inspired the work which is happening. Plus I visit other institutions as well. So we need to get more and more students and researchers interested in cybersecurity. That's one important part. And secondly, scale up this effort so that we see multiple such kind of initiative parallelly happening in the country. And last point I want to definitely come is to how to bring that research to something at a consumption level. That's something we'll discuss after I hear you about the scaling of the effort for R&D.
I mean, it's good to hear Professor Debdeep talking about the 25 PhD students, wholly devoted to hardware security. Now, that there is always a tipping point after which some research, there's a lot of collaboration among people who are working in one place, and then you find that ideas come, cross fertilization of ideas takes place, and work happens. Now, that could be looked at a model in the sense that now, it's recognized that IIT Kharagpur, for example, the lab is there, which is actually looking at hardware security. And everybody in the country knows that this is a place I would like to go. And person having an interest in hardware security goes there. Now, if everybody tries to do everything, you will find that that sort of a expertise and that sort of a focus and that sort of a magnetic attraction might not come. I think what would be required, I think, is to, the institutions to take out a couple of areas in which they feel that they can build strengths, and then start working in those areas and build up teams there. Then I think, that scaling up that you're talking of would happen. It might be, for a country of our size, maybe one IIT Kharagpur doing hardware security might not be sufficient. There might be, our country actually has a scope for having more than one institution which is focused in a particular area. I think that is one thing. The National Cybersecurity Strategy 2020, this is one component that we have put in terms of trying to identify institutions as centers of excellence for certain areas, and then build capability and capacity in that. In this regard, I will tell you that, CERTS Chennai is there. They have been there in various areas they were working. And we had a visit from the deputy NSA who had gone to that place, that there was a review that was done. And then they were told to focus on hardware security. They said, okay, there is a CRR Institute which is doing some work. There are some CDACs which are doing some work. Said, don't go into those areas which everybody else is also doing. And you're also one of them who's doing it. And because we don't have a facility in hardware security, and why not they concentrate on hardware security? I'm thankful that Professor Debdeep, is actively involved in the work that we are trying to get together at CERTS Chennai. So I think this is one way to go about for really scaling up. That's one, yeah.
Yeah. So one of the ideas that we are contemplating at DSCI is, and we will be probably launching that shortly, is called as a CSRN, the Cybersecurity Research Network. So what we are trying to do is we have now looked at some of the key institutions, and we try to look at, there are almost 137 professors that we try to look at, and the work that they have been trying to do as well. So we are trying to create a map of the work plus the paper written, published, plus the lab facility available, plus some of the capability which is developed, and we have the data now. We are creating kind of visualization out of that data so that the visibility of the work is available for everybody to look at, so that we can then leverage out of the work which is happening basically. So from that context,
I'm sorry if I'm interrupting you. I think that's a very good piece of work, because what I'm saying is, my own journey in this cybersecurity R&D has been serendipitous, in the sense that on a daily basis we discover resources. We go to a conference. Then, we pop into somebody, and then, just discussing offline during a tea break or a lunch break, or sitting in the audience, you start discussing, and then you realize that he's doing work. Then you tell him, this is one work you're interested in, and that another person who's working in that area. So it's been a serendipitous journey, and that the work that you're doing, really helps. Because here also, we are able to identify some research problems. Then this is big struggle that goes on in trying to find out whom do we saddle this with.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll just share a minute on this, that, we have in that R&D fund dispersal that happens, we have what is called a user requirement meeting. Okay. User agency requirement. So that group meets, and then they come up with user requirements. Now we have compiled all of that. Then we were sitting, I'll tell you 3-4 days back, we were sitting and then, thinking, where do we send these letters to? We have a list of problem statements that the users have come up with. Then, we did this normal thing, send it out to all the IITs. Then we have your CDAC and CDOT. So like this, with standard list that we have got. But, if you know that in particular problem areas that this is the person who is an expert, we could also send it out, mail it out to them if they have interest in submitting a research proposal in those areas. So it's really important, I think, what you're doing, the CSR.
Yeah. So we will be shortly launching, and we will be showing to you and most of other people on this panel as well. So I just want to now spend some time which is available, knowing from each of you that if you really want to scale this work is one thing, but more importantly, one of the important things that we always hear is that the research lead to paper publication or some product development, but doesn't really lead to the capability that are deployed. Because nowadays what happens now, new use cases always come from the deployment of the existing capability basically. So if you have deployed existing capability and if you are not learning what is happening with that capability in that particular operating scenarios, then probably you will not able to understand the use cases which are coming in basically. So how do you make this research happening all across, more adaptable, more productized basically, so that people use this capability, and when they use it, you learn something new, and that learning can help us to identify the new use cases or areas of research basically. So I can start with Professor Lal, and then I will come to others as well.
Okay, so here we could have gone the other way, but fine. So now when we talk about research not translating into engineering, this is a struggle that India is fighting hard to overcome. The problem is that, theoretical research at times seems to be enough for people to progress in their careers. Sometimes it is enough for PhD scholars to move to a career that they want to. Now, I'm not saying that, it should not be the case, but the point is, what also might be happening is that engineering, a concept, a research idea is not something that is rewarded enough in our system. Is a sense that I've got after so many years of both the academia and the industry. So what happens is, a lot of people in the academia who are doing research would rather publish a few papers and let somebody else convert that idea into a working engineering solution. Now, that is not how solutions are engineered. Solutions are engineered only if the person who came up with the idea is with the team throughout the process. So that will only happen if engineering solutions is at least as rewarding as publishing papers. To come up with a solution, it will take me 5 years, but in 5 years I can have as many as 25, 30 good papers. Now, if that one effort fails, then there is nothing for the researcher to show, which is not really the case. Not succeeding is also a huge learning, but the system does not recognize or acknowledge that in a manner that it should. So this puts a lot of researchers away from working on engineering solutions. So this is something that should change. And the other thing that might change is a little bit of more planning in research, a little bit more long term. For example, we have Debdeep's lab in Kharagpur. So now it is going from strength to strength. So can we, make it possible for him to focus in this area for another 15 years, for example? Not having to move around just because technology or research around him is changing. How can we make that happen? How can we connect Debdeep to this fledgling facility in IT Madras that Narendra Kumar talked about, so that he can bring them up and he has a larger group? There are two groups. So no, research cannot be planned with 2 years or 3 years horizons. They have to be 10, 15-year horizons. Only then will research be successful. So these are the two things that need to happen. One is rewarding engineering, and the other thing is very, very long-term plans. They should be 15-year, 10-year, 15-year missions, not 3-year, 5-year projects and ending there. So that I want to talk about.
Yeah. So whenever I hear any of the PhD scholar and I ask them, the very good work that you have been doing, and what is your plan with it? So he has a plan of either go some university to do a postdoctorate or probably join some academies. But but there is no intent of translating that into a kind of product. You are definitely exception. You at least can set up your own company, and at least you are selling the solution that you develop. Basically, this is a very rare exception.
Thank you. Sorry to intercept. So there is a reason for that. When a PhD scholar spends 4 years, 5 years with a faculty, he just does not learn the technology from him. He also learns the way of working from him. Okay, so if your supervisor is focused on theoretical research, it is very unlikely that the research scholar will move into engineering solutions. It's very, very unlikely. So he will pick up something similar, a postdoc or possibly an academic position. So we cannot blame the student for doing that. It's the system which encourages him and almost pulls him into that stream, and there's nothing he can do about it, or she can do about it.
Yeah. So my question, therefore, to Dr. Debdeep is it a system is definitely, but probably the incentives are also probably not that significant for somebody to really come and engineer a solution and come in the market and probably start their own, right? Basically, or usually third option is always find a job in some MNC companies which already have the R&D centers and hardware centers here in the country. So how do you see, is there a way for us to change this? Means money system can be changed, but can some incentives work which can really bring this engineering solution out of it?
It's a tough question, I would say. So let me try to address in the best possible manner. So I agree with Professor Lal about one point, definitely. It's a very important thing, like to develop something, to start something, and to grow beyond that. So for that, a long-term planning is definitely important, and rather than migrating from a topic to another topic. Right. So when we talk about like PhD students, what I've seen is they are extremely talented, but they also want encouragement, right? And the encouragement, what I've seen is always like when I'm talking about an Indian PhD student in particular, I'm talking about because I deal largely with them. So it is very important that they get the same confidence as their peers who are doing maybe a PhD in the US or maybe in Europe. So this is extremely important, because if we are not catering to this, then we will see a significant amount of brain drain. Whatever good students we are getting, all of them will migrate abroad. So therefore, right, so how can we incentivize that? So I have seen personally the easiest way, or I would say like the first thing that which comes to my mind is to motivate them or try to kind of guide them so that they can publish in top tier forums where their counterparts in abroad are publishing. So that gives them enormous amount of confidence when they come back and they can say that, okay, I have also kind of equivalent caliber. And now I will come to your third question about, like incentivizing to develop products. So personally, what I've seen is that when I've started to incubate my company as well, okay, so it is always about, like the amount of time that you can provide to it. Because personally, I also feel that, like if I, for example, take a visiting position or something like that in my university and I, work full time for my company, which I've seen my, like foreign counterparts do, but that is not a part of our social stigma as well. So this is also, I think, to do with our social mindset, like that somehow I believe that our universities are also not of that, doesn't accept that actually, like that to allow somebody to, like get, and still give them the commitment that if you are failing, then we are there to back you up actually. So that is very important, because there is always a significant probability of failing. So I think this we need to kind of collectively, like sort out, and then motivate our students as well to get into more of, like engineering kind of practices. And finally, just to conclude, I would also like to mention that largely when a PhD student sees his job opportunity, his or her job opportunity, still they find that academic positions are there to cater. We really lack, like significant amount of R&D units or R&D labs. Like, for example, I have seen in maybe, like in foreign universities, there are recruitments, like full-time recruitments, which happen for people who are, like fundamentally research scientists, and they spend their entire life being in research, being a research scientist, developing products, developing patents, like they have a completely different objective compared to our stereotype recruitments in the academia.
Yeah, so thank you. I think that's a good input, and we have left with 2-3 more minutes. So I will request brief comment from Dr. Prasad and then concluding comment from Mr. Narendra Kumar. so that we can conclude the discussion. So Dr. Prasad first, and then I will go to Narendra sir for the concluding comment.
All right. So from me, I said a couple of points. I was just looking at a few of my notes. I think I missed one point that I wanted to say is new crypto algorithms is very much required as we are moving ahead. They will retire in time, certainly, and we are getting closer. But besides that, keeping on the topic that was just discussed by professors just now, my PhD, as an example, is an industrial PhD. I was working full time, and then I did my PhD, which gave me a very different perspective of how things should happen. Yeah, but even if people join directly to universities, I have a couple of thoughts which comes from me having traveled and lived in different places, and that can be applied in the universities there as well. One thing is multidisciplinary. So even if you are doing, say, hardware security research, you're working with other teams as well. And one of the teams could be just those who are doing on pure hardware side. So that's obviously there, or more system side. Other things is somehow if they can get involved in some projects as well, which results to some bigger product output, maybe, I don't know. The other side that I have seen very beneficial, if universities have a section, and that comes as connection with multidisciplinary, is a business side section. And the business side section takes care that they have partnership with venture companies and stuff like that. Yeah, so that helps. That I have seen helps quite a lot for. Not everyone is same. Some people purely want to do really long-term research. That's perfectly fine. Some want to do very practical research, and in that case, for them, if they do very practical research, they want to go out to this product level. And then if you have business side with VC support and stuff like that, that can really help. And that the university also has to appreciate if someone comes up with a patent and give that a value as well as an incentive side. Yeah. I'll keep it to that.
Thank you. So, sir, your last concluding comment, so that we.
Yeah. I think the problem statement that is being discussed now. One of the things is it's acknowledged that a person who is purely into research, it's very difficult for him to have business skills or product engineering skills. It's very difficult, and there's a lot of amount of time that goes into starting a company and then doing all others. There's a lot of peripheral activity also that goes into it. Now, there are some institutions which are focused on product development. Like if you look at CDOT, for example, their focus is not pure R&D, but actually getting a product into the market. Now, is it possible for the institutions like the IITs who do fundamental research to go back, to CDOT to work with them? And CDOT has got the engineering skills. They could do a board, they could do the software, they could do the complete product integration, box it, and then sell it. I mean, I won't say that they know how to sell it, but at least they know how to prepare the box. So, because finally, then they do a technology transfer for that. So I think one of the things that can happen is for institutions like CDOT to work with this, researchers, and then help them in productionizing that. That I think is a way to go ahead if you really want them to do it. The other was what Dr. Prasad was saying, in having a mechanism within the university to facilitate this. The engineering part of it, multidisciplinary, engineering focused unit, which actually takes all of these inputs and then productionizes that. So this, I think, is a way forward. One quick afterthought. We talked a lot of technology. I think from our office, we're also interested in research in areas like, Cybersecurity Act. If you want to have do we require to have a Cybersecurity Act? And whether there are any sectoral regulations that are required. For example, IoT device itself. How do you mandate? Is there any liability that will come if somebody uses a non-secure IoT device? Some work on that also is an area of research that could be talked about. The Cybersecurity Act and regulations for the sectoral regulations. Yeah, I think this.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Debdeep. Thank you, Dr. Lal. Thank you, Dr. Prasad. This was really wonderful discussion, and we try to bring a lot of dimensions together, and we'll keep continuing this kind of conversation so that we create that spirit, and this spirit of people interested in the cybersecurity research, and some people taking the research to new level. And for that, these kind of conversations are required again and again, and we'll keep coming back to you for this kind of opportunities and this kind of need. So thanks for joining us today, Dr. Lal, Dr. Debdeep, Dr. Prasad, sir, and really helping us reveal some of those important, interesting insights. Over to you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
It's been a
you,
pleasure.
panelists. Thank you for sharing your valuable insights with us and discussing topics that envisage technology development, commercialization, policy formulation, and with a special focus on creating a culture for entrepreneurship and productization of technology. I'm sure our concerted efforts would help develop a robust cybersecurity innovation ecosystem. And thank you, audience, for joining us this interesting session. May I please request you to be seated in the auditorium for our next special address by Shri Ajay Prakash Savni, Secretary of Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, Government of India. After the address, I would please like to request you to visit our digital exhibition, where it's a very unique platform where 20 leading academic and public sector laboratories are showcasing their cybersecurity, R&D projects, products, and prototype. So it's a very rare occurrence that they are publicly showing their technologies. So please take use of that and please visit our exhibition. Now, with that, I would like to close our session and thank our moderator, Mr. Vinayak Godse, as well. Thank you, Vinayak. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.